The story unfolds on a cold, overcast morning in Lübeck, Germany. A courtroom filled with legal professionals, witnesses, and spectators is about to witness an event that will leave an indelible mark on everyone present. But for Marianne Bachmeier, this is not just another day. This is the day she will make a decision fueled by a grief so deep it defies reason. With unwavering resolve, she reaches into her bag, pulls out a gun, and fires 7 shots at the man on trial, the man responsible for her unimaginable pain. A man who had committed an act so vile that no words could ever justify it. A man who looked into the trusting eyes of a 7-year-old girl and destroyed her innocence in the most brutal way. What kind of crime could drive a mother to take justice into her own hands in front of a courtroom full of people? The following content discusses sensitive topics of violence and tragedy. Please proceed with caution. Welcome to Dark Desires, crime series. Thank you for being here. If you find this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3, 1950, in Sarstedt, a small town near Hildesheim in Lower Saxony, West Germany. Her childhood was anything but easy. Raised in a strict and troubled household, she grew up in the shadow of her parents' struggles. Her father, a former member of the Waffen-SS, was an authoritarian figure battling alcoholism, which often led to conflict at home. Her parents, refugees from East Prussia after World War II, eventually divorced. When her mother remarried, Marianne's relationship with her stepfather proved just as difficult, marked by further tension and discord. As a teenager, she began to break away from the expectations imposed on her. At 16, she became pregnant with her first child, but unable to care for the baby, placed the child for adoption. At 18, tragedy struck when she was raped shortly before giving birth to her second child. Like her first, this baby was also given up for adoption, deepening her sense of loss and trauma. At 22, Marianne became pregnant again. This time, she decided to raise her child. On November 14, 1972, she gave birth to Anna, who quickly became the center of her world. But being a single mother came with its own challenges. Juggling work and parenthood, Marianne took a job at a local pub, often bringing Anna along during her late-night shifts. Many nights, the little girl would fall asleep there while her mother worked. Shaped by her own difficult upbringing, Marianne encouraged Anna to be independent from a young age. Despite their unconventional home life, Anna was a bright, lively, and curious child, well-liked by those who knew her. So many could tell she was learning to be independent. Klaus Grabowski was a German man born in 1947 with a deeply troubled life and a disturbing criminal history. He lived in Hamburg and worked as a butcher, leading an outwardly ordinary existence. However, beneath this facade was a pattern of abuse and deviant behavior that escalated over time. Grabowski's criminal record began with multiple convictions for sexually abusing young girls. He was classified as a pedophile, and his repeated offenses raised concerns about his ability to be rehabilitated. Klaus Grabowski underwent chemical castration in 1976 as part of his sentence for previous convictions of sexually abusing young girls. At the time, chemical castration was a method used in Germany to suppress the testosterone levels of sex offenders in an attempt to reduce their sexual urges and prevent them from reoffending. Grabowski agreed to the procedure, which was intended to curb his pedophilic tendencies. However, despite the treatment, he later sought hormone therapy to reverse its effects, regaining his testosterone levels and, tragically, his predatory impulses. On the morning of May 5, 1980, Marianne and Anna had an argument. Like many parent-child disagreements, it started over something minor but escalated quickly. Feeling upset and misunderstood, Anna decided to skip school that day. She left the house on her own, her emotions still raw from the argument. What happened next would forever change Marianne's life and become one of the most shocking and tragic cases in German history. While wandering in the area, she encountered Grabowski, who lured Anna to his home under a pretext to show her his new female kittens added to his cats. Once inside, he held her captive for several hours. During this time, Grabowski allegedly sexually assaulted Anna, and despite her pleading cries, he ultimately strangled her with a pair of his fiancée's tights. The brutality of the crime shocked the community. Can we pause and take a moment to reflect on what could possibly be wrong with some people? What could drive someone to look into the eyes of an innocent 7-year-old and commit such a horrifying act? After killing Anna, Klaus Grabowski went to great lengths to cover up his crime and avoid detection. His actions after the murder were calculated and deliberate. Grabowski placed her body in a wooden box. This was likely an attempt to make the body harder to identify and to delay its discovery. He transported the wooden box under the cover of darkness and abandoned it near a canal in Lübeck. The location was carefully chosen far enough from his home that he thought it would not immediately link back to him. By leaving the body near water, he may have hoped it would eventually be swept away or decomposed beyond recognition. After disposing of the body, Grabowski returned home and attempted to act as though nothing had happened. He relied on his fiancée's silence and his own calm demeanor to avoid drawing suspicion. Marianne Bachmeier returned home expecting to find her daughter, but the house was empty. At first, she thought Anna might be playing nearby or visiting a friend. As minutes turned into hours, her worry grew into panic. She began searching the neighborhood, asking around, but no one had seen Anna return from school. Confused and frightened, Marianne contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Authorities quickly mobilized a search effort, distributing descriptions of Anna and questioning neighbors. The community joined in, desperately hoping she would be found safe. As night fell, the fear in Marianne's heart became unbearable. She could not sleep, holding on to the hope that Anna would walk through the door, but the following day, her worst nightmare became reality. Anna's lifeless body was found near a canal. After Anna's body was discovered, investigators launched an intensive search for answers. The community of Lübeck was devastated, and the police began piecing together the events of her final hours. The case took a critical turn when witnesses came forward, stating they had last seen Anna near the home of Klaus, just a few streets away. His criminal history immediately made him a prime suspect. When the police questioned him, his nervous and evasive behavior only deepened their suspicions. The breakthrough came when Grabowski's fiancée, who he confided in her after the murder, was weighed down by guilt and fear, confessed to the police. She revealed that Grabowski had lured Anna into his home under the pretense of showing her his cats. fearing that Anna might reveal she had been in his house, and terrified of the consequences this could bring, Grabowski panicked. His fiancée's confession provided crucial details that tied him directly to the murder. She explained how he had planned the disposal of the body and shared specific information about the stockings used to strangle Anna, which matched evidence collected from the scene. Investigators also found fibers and materials in Grabowski's home that corresponded to those on Anna's body and the wooden box. Forensic evidence strengthened the case further, leaving no doubt that Grabowski was responsible for the crime. The police immediately arrested Klaus Grabowski, and the community was enraged by the horrifying revelations. The public's outrage grew as more details about his dark history and the tragic loss of Anna became known. The case was airtight, with witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and the fiancé's confession painting a clear picture of the events leading to Anna's murder. Grabowski's trial was set to begin in 1981. The nation watched closely, demanding justice for Anna. However, the trial would take an unexpected and shocking turn as Anna's grieving mother, Marianne Bachmeier, took matters into her own hands in an act of vigilante justice that would forever etch this case into history. The discovery of her daughter's lifeless body inside a wooden box near a canal was not just heartbreaking, it was unbearable. Marianne was consumed with sorrow, anger, and guilt. The argument they had before Anna disappeared likely haunted her, adding another layer of pain to her overwhelming loss. She struggled with the knowledge of how cruelly her child had been taken from her and the horrific circumstances of her death. This grief and despair stayed with Marianne through the investigation and trial of Klaus Grabowski. As details of Anna's suffering and the cold, calculated nature of her murder were revealed in court, Marianne's emotions turned to a searing rage. The news spread quickly, and soon the world knew the name Klaus Grabowski, a man with a history of harming children, a man who should have been behind bars, had instead been free to destroy another life. Marianne sat in a haze of grief, surrounded by condolences that felt hollow. What comfort could words bring when the system that was meant to protect had failed so completely? The trial of Klaus Grabowski began in 1981. Marianne attended every session, sitting in the courtroom with the weight of her loss pressing down on her. Each day, she listened as the details of her daughter's final hours were dissected. Anna had trusted Grabowski. She had been lured into his home, held against her will, and murdered without mercy. The words echoed in Marianne's mind over and over. But what cut the deepest wasn't the crime itself. It was the way Grabowski sat there, calm, indifferent. During the trial of Klaus Grabowski, he made a shocking claim. Grabowski alleged that Anna had attempted to extort money from him by threatening to tell her mother about the abuse, suggesting that this fear of returning to prison led him to commit the murder. This assertion was seen by many as a blatant attempt to deflect blame and malign the young victim's character. Marianne Bachmeier, Anna's mother, was present in the courtroom when this claim was made. Goodness, he actually claimed a 7-year-old tried to seduce and blackmailed him. As the trial progressed, Marianne's pain turned into something else, something darker. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was fury. Every day in that courtroom, she felt it build inside her, a fire that no tears could put out. She watched Grabowski, saw the way he sat there, without remorse, without fear. He was still alive, still breathing, while Anna was buried in the cold earth. What if the court failed again? What if, somehow, he walked free? The thought was unbearable. On the morning of March 6, 1981, Marianne walked into the courtroom with a small pistol hidden. No one noticed the way her hand shook, the way her heart pounded in her chest. The trial resumed as usual. The judge, the lawyers, the spectators, all playing their part in the slow, deliberate process of justice, but Marianne wasn't willing to wait. As Grabowski sat there, she rose to her feet. She didn't hesitate. She pulled the gun from her bag and fired. 7 shots rang out. The courtroom erupted in chaos. 6 bullets found their mark, and Grabowski collapsed onto the floor, his life ending in an instant. Screams filled the air. Spectators ducked for cover. Security rushed toward Marianne, but she did not move. She did not try to run. The gun fell from her hand, and for the first time in a year, she exhaled. Justice had been served, if not by the courts, then by a mother who had nothing left to lose. Marianne was arrested immediately. In the days that followed, her actions were dissected by the media, debated by legal experts, and discussed by families across Germany. Some called her a murderer, others called her a hero. But for Marianne, the labels didn't matter. She had done what she felt was right. At her trial, the court acknowledged the depth of her grief. She was not a cold-blooded killer. She was a mother pushed to the edge by a system that had failed her child. Instead of a life sentence, she was convicted of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm. The verdict was a 6-year term in prison, but would serve only 3. But even after her release, she was never truly free. The weight of what she had done, of what she had lost, never left her. She lived the rest of her life in quiet exile, away from the public eye. And in 1996, at the age of 46, Marianne Bachmeier passed away from cancer. Her story remains one of the most haunting cases in modern history, not just because of the crime, but because of the question it leaves behind. When justice fails, what do you do? For Marianne Bachmeier, the answer had been clear. In a world where the legal system had failed her daughter, where repeat offenders like Klaus Grabowski were allowed to walk free, she took justice into her own hands. Some saw her as a grieving mother who had done what any parent might in her situation. Others feared what her actions represented, a dangerous precedent where emotion overruled the law. After serving her sentence, Marianne attempted to rebuild what remained of her life. She moved away from the public eye, avoiding the relentless scrutiny of a society that could never fully agree on whether she was right or wrong. Over the years, the memory of that day in the courtroom faded into history, but the impact of her story never disappeared. Her act of vengeance sparked debates that continue to this day about justice, grief, and the limits of human endurance. Could the system have done more to protect Anna? Could it have prevented Grabowski from striking again? And in the absence of true justice, was Marianne's act of violence the only real way to make things right? By the time she passed away in 1996, Marianne had long stopped trying to answer those questions for herself. She had lived through every mother's worst nightmare. She had faced the unbearable, and when the system had failed her, she had made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She had been judged by the courts, by the media, and by the world. But in the end, the only judgment that truly mattered was her own. And for the rest of her days, she carried the knowledge that while she had lost everything, she had ensured that Klaus Grabowski would never hurt another child again. Thank you for watching. Please consider sharing this video and subscribing to the channel. It will motivate me to drop more stories. Let me know if you like the narration as well.